Bienvenidos a todos nuestros amables oyentes. Willkommen and unser Hörer. My name is Chris. I'm here with Josh, and my friends choose to listen to this talk. How are you today, Josh?
Oh,
that is the standard Klingon greeting there.
So, we have a lot to talk about, Josh. How about we start off the show with like a recap for people listening of what went down in episode 3?
Let's do it. Let's fly.
Let's fly. I liked how the episode was divided into 4 separate storylines. That really kept me in the show. We start off with something that you don't really see a lot in Star Trek, which is organized robbery. You see that, according to the general storyline of the show, that dilithium is being distributed, and they're about to give it to a planet that is remain nameless. Very cool ship, by the way. I really like the ship.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Then all of a sudden, we're attacked. What did you think of that?
I thought that the action scene was. I agree with you. The ship, the USS Sojourner, was a very impressive looking design. I hope we see that again.
Yes.
I thought the scene had a terrific opening fight scene. It was very well choreographed. I forget the name of the character, the captain of the Sojourner, who was fighting to protect the dilithium, but the actor who played him really did the fight scene very well. Having the Romulan warrior monk, Giovanni, she was amazing. I'm not sure how much of the sword fighting skill she actually learned or how much she knew coming into it, but she was terrific. I knew from the get-go when I saw the title of the episode, Choose to Live, I knew it was going to focus on the Kwijan Maru, the Romulan warrior nuns who believe in absolute candor and are apparently great fighters and always take up a lost cause, no matter what it is, which we were introduced to in season 1 of Picard.
And in absolute candor, I love the next scene, which was about Navarre and the Federation Council President and the Starfleet getting together to discuss what are we going to do about this, because it really, I think, foreshadows something we can talk more about later, but the real politique that I think we're going to see throughout the season. And I also love the fact that Burnham's mom is present. And at the end of the sit-down discussion, they decide we have to do something about this, so we're going to team up. And Burnham and Burnham's mom will go try to find her and bring her in. And I especially like the scene that we see afterwards where the president of the Federation Council pulls Burnham aside and says, listen, you're my person. You have to bring her in. You're in charge. And, Burnham is, might be conflicted, but in a relationship with the president, but he's clear that, okay, we're going to get her. And then we start with the separate storyline, which is around Stamets and Book. What did you think of their interaction in the engine room?
I think there is a growing sense of chemistry between the two of them. Book has certainly been struggling to find some sort of sense of peace and closure with what's happened to his home planet. Stamets is very determined, both because he promised Book he would come up with a solution of what is this thing, what is this anomaly, and also the fact that I think there is a growing friendship between them. And I think Book, whether or not he knows it or not, does need all the friends he can get, and especially because he's been a guy that's lived in the universe he was living in until a year ago or a couple of years ago was full of commerce and well, you want me to do this for you, what are you going to do for me? And now he's met a whole bunch of people that are like, here, let us help you, it doesn't matter we don't care that you could do something for us. We're just going to help you because that's who we are. We're Starfleet. I do think there is a real good sense of chemistry there between them now, especially since they share this thing that they're the only two people that can make the spore drive work.
Right. And then the scene shifts to the other storyline, which is involving Gray and Adira and the artificial body that's being built.
Mhm.
I really like that scene because you see something that has been hinted at all along to shout back to Picard that they're going to transfer his consciousness into the artificial body. And what did you think of the appearance of the
Guardian. Guardian G.
Guardian Z? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was glad that we recalled that character from season 3. If I remember correctly, he was not as open-minded about the whole thing with Adira having the tall symbiont. He certainly has definitely grown, and his thinking has changed, so that he was very willing to help achieve this, to help Gray out and to help the tall symbiont. So I thought that was really awesome of his character, and I enjoyed that whole story. I thought that was a great story arc. I'm glad to see that they didn't just all at once, transplant Gray from Adira and then put it in the symbiote, and then it woke up. That it was a process that took him a while. As his, and I loved it at the end where he said, "I knew you were there. I could hear you. I couldn't speak just yet. I was trying to make the body work. I knew you were with me the whole time." So that was wonderful.
Yeah, I like throughout the whole episode how you go back to the sequence in the sickbay, and they're waiting to see, as you alluded, for if he's going to actually wake up. I especially like the part where Guardian Z says, "Listen, this is not without risk. I mean, there is no assurance that without a human host to guide you, you'll actually make it there." And personally, I thought that there should be some risk implied, because anytime when you're doing like even a transfer of data, there's always the possibility, minute as it may be, that the data could be corrupted. So would we get the same Gray that we've seen before into the host body? And we'll talk about this a bit more later in the show. I'm thinking there's a possibility there for some changes that might add some dynamic to the show. But within that whole sequence, I really like the new 10 forward. For those people who haven't seen the episode yet, it looks, Josh, to me, it looked like a pub with the heaths. But what did you think of the design?
I love the design. I love that there's a fireplace. It's very cozy. I did notice that the shelves where all the bottles and everything looked very 60s-ish. This weird kind of frame that that looks, it was really impressive. I liked it. Did you happen to notice, though, I think the bartender is actually a Ferengi.
It does look like a Ferengi.
Yeah, maybe a little taller than most Ferengi we've seen, but that could be, this person could be half Ferengi, half another species. But I thought, wow, okay, cool. We finally seen the ship's bar, and it's got that wonderful little fireplace. It's definitely a lot more cozy than the 10 Ford we remember.
Absolutely. And as we know from Deep Space Nine, Ferengi and Klingons at the very least can get together.
Yeah, I mean, at least, they are compatible in that respect. I don't know if they can actually make kids, but yeah, they can definitely get together in that regard. Yeah.
Well, I also think if it was a Ferengi, if it's a little taller, it's about time. One would hope over 850 years that they're able to grow a little bit. But let's segue to the other storyline here, which is Book and Stamets. Before we go to the main storyline, of course, which is what's happening with the Sisterhood. after the interaction in the ship in the engine room, you next see them at the Vulcan Science Academy. And
Navarre Science Academy.
Navarre, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I loved the setting of the architecture because it seemed so advanced, and yet it still kept the cubic form that you saw from the classic Vulcan schools. And a little bit later, when we talk about the history of Vulcans and Romulans, we can go back to that. But I love the architecture. I love the setting, and there you see Stamets explaining all his data, and you can see the book is visibly uncomfortable about this, and then you can just see how Stamets is completely thrown when they're like, okay, we're going to meditate about this. Like, we can collectively meditate. And I love the idea that in 850 years, they've achieved a point where they can all meditate in unison, like a unimind, to think about, and solve a problem. And, and then, they could have just left us with them thinking about it there. But then we have a really nice segment interaction between the president of Navarre and Book. Like, what did you think of all of that?
I really loved it. I agree with you. Yeah, the setting really reminded me of the set for the Amok Time, which was the first time we ever went to Vulcan, back in the original series. So it does look like that. It does feel way more like Vulcan, I think, than previous scenes of it on Discovery. I agree. I did like the fact that, the Vulcans are going to go into this deep meditation where they're going to contemplate the facts that Stamets has given them, and then they're going to come back with an answer that, they're going to go through all their knowledge, and they're going to think this through. I love the fact that Book was able to get some, some help from the president of Navarre with the Vulcan mind meld. I thought that was really interesting, and then helped him retrieve that one memory that he only noticed for just a second, and it had slipped his mind that he saw this. And I think that gave him a real sense of peace and a little bit of closure. I don't think it's completely closure, but he put his necklace back on, and he's lying in bed with Michael and talking about it, and that at least he's still sad, but at least he knows he didn't fail them anymore. He did what he could, and he's made peace with that. Now he has to move on and try to help the team stop this from happening again to another planet. I'm glad they're not going the route of him becoming doing the Captain Ahab, or Captain Picard versus his Borg cube thing. I'm glad they're going in a completely different direction with him. And Book is such a great character. I've been so happy to have had that character on since last year, and he really is. He really brings a lot to the show. So.
Yeah, I think symbolically at the end of his storyline in the episode, when you see him in the very nice captain's quarters, and you see the holographic projection of the forest with the planet of Krazon, you realize that he has reached a balance of peace thanks to the mind meld. So I totally agree with you. It's good that we're not going into future episodes of him being on a Captain Ahab. But now let's talk about the main storyline, which was how Burnham and her mother and Tilly, who is, and again, I really like this part, which is following up on the end of the last episode when she's talking to the doctor about how can I get out of, something's not quite right. And, you have that scene in the mess hall, which I've got to tell you, I also am not a fan of mac and cheese. Yes.
Neither am I.
Breaking news. So I love the scene where she sits down with Saru and you're expecting, some type of talk, and she takes a mouthful and then she's like, oh no. And that leads Saru to what happened? And she talks about how Dr. Culber is trying to get her out of her comfort zone. And Saru, who's turning out to be a fantastic number 2, very sensible, realizes I know a way to get her out of the comfort zone beyond just watering my plants, which she offers to do, which is to go off on this mission. And he talks about it to Burnham in the hallway, which Josh, to me, it's beginning to like these walk and talks. I'm really liking it. It's kind of got like a West Wing vibe to it.
Yeah.
And C realizes, yeah, this is actually a good idea. And then they go off, and I also the notion that there was a tracker in the dilithium, because it makes sense. They've got to, this is valuable stuff. So then they reach the moon, and they get there, and it's like, they're analyzing, and they see that there's something underneath the planet, and then there's another attack. What did you think of that fight sequence?
I thought the fight sequence was terrific. Just going back to what you were just saying about the West Wing vibe of them walking through the corridors and talking. Yeah, this is a show that's supposed to be in motion. So yeah, you want to have some scenes where they're sitting around relaxed, like in the mess hall and like in the 10 forward. But then you want to see a lot of key scenes happening where they're walking, they're moving with a purpose from one place to another. That's good. I like that scene. I hadn't really thought about it, but yeah, that makes sense for that. I really did enjoy the fight scenes. I thought they were terrific. I thought that finding out that I had a feeling that it was going to turn out that Giovanni, the warrior nun, she was not doing this out of malice. She didn't want to hurt anybody, but she wanted to help these people to save them first from grave robbers and then from the anomaly. I thought it was really brilliant. We find out, this species, their bodies contain latinum. Okay, that's a nice callback to DS9 with Gold Quest Latinum.
So I really liked the imagery of them beaming down into, at first what they think is some type of like mausoleum, and then they realize when they discover the one body, no, this is actually a transport ship. And I also agree with you that the idea of a life form that is not based on carbon, it kind of excites me, because why should it always be carbon? I mean, that was why I was a fan of the the silicon entity that we first see in Encounter with Farpoint, the silicon entity, because a life form in a vast universe does not necessarily need to be carbon based. So I like the fact that they discover this, and that in the writing they gave us a bit of a background of like why Giovanni was doing this. That she had tried to go through the proper legal channels, was denied, and so this would be sort of the method of last resort that she was pushed into when no one would listen to her, which is a situation that many of us have encountered, that you're not listening to me, and so I have to take the situation into my own hands.
Yeah, which is of course very Star Trek. Now that you mentioned it, it does remind me of Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock, where you have the whole scene where Kirk goes to the Admiral, asks to get the Enterprise back so he can go return to Genesis and get Spock back. And then he's denied, so Kirk decides he's going to take this into his own hands with the help of his crew. One other thing I really want to mention before we move on is that this episode really does kind of adhere to certain principles that Leonard Nimoy had when it came to making a Star Trek episode, which was every character has to have something significant going on. Okay, at least all the main ones. So you clearly have Michael, Tilly, and Michael's mom, and Giovanni. They have their story going on. You have Saru, who's kind of, he's there helping out Tilly. You got the Gray Adira Q thing. You got Stamets and Book and the Devar president. All of them get to do something significant in the episode. And then, of course, one other thing I really like is that great scene with the Admiral telling Michael at the end that the Federation president is like a symphony conductor. we are all playing our parts. We have to have faith that she's conducting us in the right way. And I thought that was a great line.
And, when in the wrap up of the episode, we see everyone back at Federation headquarters, and they've got Giovanni, and you see again the realpolitik of how the Federation president really wants Navarre to join them, and so she extends an olive branch at the expense perhaps of Starfleet, saying, "We're going to return the prisoner to you. You do what you want." And the Admiral is uncomfortable with this, but so is Burnham, but they accept his decision. And like you said, they have this great talk about, what matters is not the individual pieces, but the entire piece performed by the symphony. And sometimes, that may involve having to, sit out a piece where you think, well, I could contribute, to the musical composition here. But the aim is there's a greater goal here. And, it's part of the realpolitik that I think we're going to see, at least I hope we're going to see throughout the series. But I think that was a good recap. I think now we should dive into some of our analysis of the episode. And do you want to start us off with a talk about Vulcans and Romulans? Because the involvement of Navarre here and both for the future, I think invites a sort of a recap of what has been going on over the past centuries in the history of Trek between Vulcans and Romulans.
Okay. So what we do know of the Vulcan and Romulan history is that at some point, an indeterminate number of years, because depending on which episode says it could have been 1,000 or several thousand years in the past, when Iraq came about and he developed his teachings of the idea of logic and self-discipline, which apparently won out the majority of the planet Vulcan. And at that point, a smaller group of Vulcans decided to leave Vulcan and developed a philosophy based on not suppressing their emotions, but controlling them through a much more militant discipline. And ultimately, they found the planet that they named Romulus and Remus. And they settled there and began building what we eventually came to call the Romulan Empire. The first time, of course, we saw them was in the episode "The Balance of Terror," when we've learned that at a point a century before, Earth had this large war, the first major space war they had ever had, with this unknown enemy known only as the Romulans, and they never even saw what they looked like. And they finally get a look at them and they realize, oh my God, they look just like the Vulcans. They're an offshoot of the Vulcans somehow. And Spock talked about how he believed that they were savage and aggressive and that they could not show weakness to them. And certainly, as the characters developed, this idea was seen a lot throughout the original series, and then into Star Trek: The Next Generation, where they really came into their own. And we saw them, that they had clearly built themselves up. Obviously, the biggest thing in the generation era in general that we noticed was the Romulans had suddenly developed this odd forehead ridge, this V-shaped forehead ridge, which the Vulcans didn't have. So that's been one of the great unanswered questions of that era. Why did that happen? And the only thing I can think of is that when the Romulans realized that their Vulcan cousins were members of the Federation, they probably worried that the Federation might ask some Vulcans to try to infiltrate Romulan society and learn more about them. So they went through this massive genetics program or cosmetic surgery program to create this forehead ridge that would clearly lasted 1,000 years after. Then, of course, at the end of the 24th century, we had the supernova of Romulus's home star, which is talked about in both the series Picard and in the first Star Trek movie with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto, and that Spock tried to save their son, but clearly it did not work, and he was thrown back into a pocket universe or alternate universe. But not before which we do know that from the book Last Best Hope, which does tie into the events of Picard, Spock did get several of his Romulan dissenters that he had been teaching since the mid 24th century about Vulcan ways and who wanted to reunite with their Vulcan cousins. He got them out of Romulan space, and they settled on Vulcan, and they began to, obviously the culture changed because now you had two different cultures. You had Vulcans and Romulans, and both of them had different, distinct cultural beliefs. And over the next 800 years, they had to learn how to coexist and take what was best about each of them and make themselves into one culture. And ultimately, at some point, they changed the name of the planet Vulcan to Ni'Var, which many of us believe stands for now identifies as Vulcan and Romulus. So, and now we are here. We are trying to bring Ni'Var back into the Federation, and it is clear that the Ni'Var president and many people on her planet want to be part of the Federation again. So this was this is awesome. I'm really glad to see that we still have things like the Vulcan mind meld. I'm obviously skating a lot of things. There's a lot of other things we could get into at another time, but there's just so much there. I would say that the Vulcans are definitely one of the richest about them. We know so much about their culture and everything.
Vulcans and Romulans have always been close. I mean, if you look at the episodes Journey to Babel and Balance of Terror, you'll see they all look almost identical.
Yeah.
And, that's an homage, of course, to Mark Leonard playing the role of the Romulan commander and also of Spock's father when we see a Vulcan who's not Spock.
Well, I just want to say one thing about that. I've suspected that the reason for that is not just because Mark Leonard was such an incredible actor. He really was. But it was because when they filmed Journey to Babel in season 2, well, they already had a pair of Vulcan ears that fit him, so it was just easier to recast him as from the Romulan commander to Ambassador Sarek. And Ambassador Sarek, of course, is the character he was most identified with as in Star Trek forever. I mean, not only did he do Journey to Babel, he did the voice of Sarek in 2 episodes of the Star Trek animated series. Obviously appeared as Sarek in Star Trek 3 and 4, did the voiceover in Star Trek 5, and returned to Star Trek 6, and then came back for 2 more episodes in Star Trek The Next Generation. So it was a character he was identified with for many years after.
I agree with you that it was likely because the ears already fit him because they had to control costs back then with productions. But in the history of Trek, we do see the transformation, the evolution of the Vulcans and Romulans, which Spock in Unification 1 and 2 alludes to and is attempting to achieve. And we finally, though it sort of takes a tragedy, which is the explosion of their son, but we finally do see 850 years later the unification of both. And, Romulans have always been very emotional. Vulcans try to suppress the emotion. And I really enjoyed the fact that the president of our mentions is like, no, it's a common misconception. People think we're emotionless, but we actually do have emotions in us. We just try to control it through logic. So obviously that would not be an easy integration of Vulcans and Romulans, but they've made it work. Love the architecture also. I totally agree with you that it is very reminiscent in the shapes and octagonal forms to what we saw in early Trek. And I also like the fact that we see something that from Picard still make it through, which is the sisterhood alive and well, still fighting. So the continuity and the evolution of how the series has treated Vulcans and Romulans is something that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
One thing of the episode that raised a question mark for me, and I want to ask you about this, is how do they know that this race that they brought out of stasis is a benevolent race?
That's a very good question. We don't know, but I think that with Giovanni and what her people believe, I think they feel like it doesn't matter whether they're benevolent or not. They just needed help, and she's going to help them, give them a chance, and hopefully they will be benevolent and that she's making the right call. You know, I don't think that's something that really played into it for her. But of course, we also have to remember what we would consider malevolent might not be malevolent to another species.
I mean,
At all.
these species could be conquerors. They could be Klingon-like in their desire to expansion. They could be like the Gorn. We don't know. So that was one thing that kind of caught my attention. Like, how do we know that they would be peaceful? And this goes back to another thing that I hope is correct in the next episode. But when they flash on the alien, they say there's no data. Is that no data for their current records, or is that no data for their current records and the sphere data? Because this is something that I come back to again. It seems like we are ignoring the sphere data.
Yeah, that's a good point. We certainly, there is the sphere data. We don't know how extensive it is. We don't know where it's gone. I mean, that was the whole crux of season 2 leading into season 3 and why they had to go to the future to begin with. So, okay, where the heck is that sphere data? Maybe it's about time it started earning its pay. We went to all this trouble to take it into the future so that Section 31 wouldn't get their hands on it. But I think we need to go back and revisit that and see what's going on with the sphere data and I mean, clearly it is an archive. It is a treasure trove of information that we need to know more about. That certainly is a resource that the team on Discovery really needs, especially with this entity that seems to be eating up planets. Sorry, Chris, your mic has been mute.
Oh.
There you go.
Okay. One other observation of the awesome and not so awesome this episode, which is I understand she has a really busy schedule, so we're only going to be able to see her for a handful of episodes. But among the not so awesome is I need me some Jet Reno.
Me too. Yeah, I mean we need Jet back as soon as she can work it into her schedule. And you're right, she is very busy, and we do need Jet back. I mean, I know she's got like a million things on her plate. She's the hardest working lady in Hollywood right now, and the sooner but we need her back because she's such a great foil for Stamets.
I mean, absolutely, she's the perfect foil. Even when he was doing the analysis during the episode, I kept on thinking, you need someone here to just point out to him, like, the fifth thing that's missing, which is the chronotons.
Tachyons.
Tachyons, thank you, tachyons. You just see what's needed there to point out, yeah, this is a great theory, but what about your tachyons? Just to, get him on edge.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would say, which is not so awesome about this episode, and we can talk a bit more about this in things to come, but not as visible as No Tig Notaro, but we still don't know who or what David Cronenberg's character does or who he is.
Yeah, I know. We need some Dave here. Tell David to get in there and tell us more about what he's got going on, because he's this awesome mystery guy. I'm starting to wonder though, if you've got David Cronenberg, can we also get David Lynch in there too? Because I mean, that would be an episode in and of itself, as Cronenberg and Lynch kind of having their own 32nd century adventure. I'm wondering what that would look like.
No, that's very true.
Offhand, I think it's going to involve a transporter accident and a woman talking to a log.
Well, at the very least, a holographic log. Yeah. I was also in the state of being slightly. Don't get me wrong. I really liked the episode. Again, I loved how you had different storylines that we could all follow easily throughout the episode. But when I saw Saru, who I know is already there, and I saw the president of Navarre, I thought there was something going on between Saru and the president of Navarre in the end of last season. And so I would have liked to have seen a scene or two of them together, since they were both at headquarters at the same time.
Yeah, that would have been good. I think that with so much going on, we couldn't do it this episode. It might be nice to see it in a future episode. I think, that them interacting more. I think there was definitely something there. I think definitely a friendship, a lot of commonality there. That I think they enjoy each other's company. So hopefully we will see more of that.
All in all, I thought that this episode was the right mix of strong writing, limited but very good use of special effects, like really great fight scenes. I mean, again, I want to go to very well choreographed, and you see something that you don't see often, which is someone in command, is basically murdered, which is something you don't see a lot. And again, the real politique that I was hoping we would see throughout the episode throughout the series, and I think we will, of what does it take to bring the Federation back together? What log rolling will have to be engaged in? And the Federation president, up until now, to me, seems like sees the person you want as is written for the job. He understands what needs to be done, and he's willing to do it. And Starfleet officers may not necessarily agree with it, but at least the admiral, understands this is a symphony.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he is a great middle ground between the Federation president and Captain Burnham. I mean, Captain Burnham, I've said this many times, is very. She's got a lot of Kirk in her DNA, and she sort of says this is the way it's got to be. I got to make it like this. And the Federation president, no, we're going to do it this way. And somewhere in between, you got the admiral, and he's saying, hold on, we're a symphony. We have to work together. Okay, we each bring something to all of this, and I think he's so brilliant. I'm looking for. I hope we get to see him at a convention soon. I would love to meet him and hear more of his thoughts about the character.
Well, I've been a fan of his not only since Alias, but also in his voice acting, which, if you might recall, in the original Young Justice series, he was the voice of Ra's al Ghul.
He was, yeah. He definitely is. He was great at Ra's al Ghul. I mean, almost even better than David Warner, who was one of my favorites.
It's close. I might still put David Warner first, but it's close.
It's definitely close, yeah.
So why don't we talk about what we think about moving ahead, some of our theories. And I'll start off by saying that I actually do think it's a wormhole. But I think it's a wormhole that is somehow controlled by someone.
Yeah, I think, Stamets really does think it is, but of course everybody's saying that, but there's no tachyons. We see no indication of tachyons here. Okay, well, there are, there's all kinds of cosmic phenomenon, and doing a lot of research for some of the science fiction stories I write, I come across some interesting things that like, okay, we think this is how it would work, but with this one, we're not so sure. I think you're right. It is some sort of a wormhole that is being controlled. Now, that leads to the question,
Ooh.
are we going to Bajor at some point to do a comparison? Are we going to see the prophets? I would love to see where Bajor is at 800 years after Deep Space Nine. Is DS9 even still there?
Yeah.
Are we going to get to see that? Might we get to see a Nana visitor playing a descendant of Kira Nerys? That would be kind of cool. Not sure yet. I haven't heard anything about that, but that would be really awesome. I've missed the wormhole. I've missed the prophets. I would love to go see them and see what they've been up to.
So I absolutely agree with you. I think that would probably be the motivation to go back to Bajor, to measure what happens with their stable wormhole. As we know from Voyager, there can be unstable wormholes that can just randomly appear and then appear in a different section. So it's not too much, I think, of a stretch to think about this might be an unstable wormhole that is somehow controlled by someone somehow. And let me even take it a step further and say that it might be that this wormhole is something that is controlled not by the prophets, but after 850 years, it's somehow controlled by the Pirates. That they're trying.
That you got something there.
Yeah.
That would be really, that maybe the Pirates have created their own gateway to their dimension, and they're being far more malevolent, which obviously they're the Pirates. They're always going to be malevolent. And that could be some new something that, some new revelation or prophecy that maybe the Bajorans know something about.
I think we're also going to see Deep Space Nine. I think it's going to be not the same station because it can't be after 850 years, but I think it's going to kind of be a situation like an old city and a new city where you will see that they have built on top of it. And so it's going to be a much more massive space station, and you'll have the old ring, which will probably be at the heart of the station, and then you'll have the new ring. And I really hope this happens because I'd be really excited to see what the design concept would be for Deep Space Nine 850 years later.
I will say, just to warn everybody, guys, if we do that, I'm going to cry because I'm going to be like, I'm going home. I'm home.
I also would like to see in this new Deep Space Nine if there are symbols of Captain Cisco, because he is the emissary. It stands to reason that even after 150 years, you would still see imagery of Captain Cisco, and how comfortable would the Federation be with one of their former captains being like a religious icon? I mean, there's so many interesting things that could happen, and I really want to think they've been saving Bajor up for this storyline, and that the whole introduction of is this a wormhole or is it isn't is part of like, okay, this is justification to bring us back to Bajor.
Yeah, that would be true. And again, like with Nana Visitor, we've seen no indication of Avery Brooks making a return or appearance. Has Benjamin Sisko. Although, I mean, that would be a great way to like, oh, surprise, the emissary has returned, and he's coming to help Burnham defeat the Pa-Wraith wormhole, if that's what it is.
There's been a lot of chatter about them trying to get Avery Brooks back into the fold. It's very possible they could be adopting the Disney model. It's very good at holding things back. That they might have agreed to have him film a couple of scenes, and they're just holding it back. I mean, that's just speculation and theory, but I would hope so, because if you can't really have a return to Bajor or Deep Space Nine without at least a painting of Captain Cisco somewhere. And this could also, we do not know for sure if the Dax symbiote is like still alive. So this could be another motivation to return to Trill to see if they can interact with the Dax symbiote, who would have more information around Deep Space Nine. But another thing I want to get into as far as theories is I want to go back to who is David Cronenberg? Is he, is he the head of Section 31? I mean, who is he?
That's an excellent question. I think that Section 31, I think, is being, is he some higher up in sections? I mean, all clues point to that. The fact that he wears this dark suit, that he had a dark comm badge, that he was showing Georgia, I'm sorry. And even she seemed to think he could be some version of Section 31. That was what she was thinking it was. And if that's the case, how open are they now? Clearly, there have been moments where, okay, some people have heard about them. And then, of course, by the time, we heard about them on DS9, okay, it seemed like, all right, the higher-ups in Starfleet knew who they were, but nobody else seemed to know much about them. Or they were kind of one of these just rumors that were out there, a secret group of intelligence operatives that operated inside of Starfleet, but clearly nobody knew anything about. Who is this guy? What is his function? Is he maybe a changeling? Could he be a Q?
I don't think it's a Q. The changeling is interesting. I'm beginning to fall a little bit more along the sides of he. Do you remember Gary 7?
Oh, yes. I do remember. Yes. Gary 7, the Star Trek spinoff that almost happened and didn't. Happened. Yes. From the episode Operation Earth, the season 2 finale. For those of you who don't remember.
With Terry Garr. A very young Terry Garr.
A very, very young Terry Garr. Yes. So for those of you who don't remember, in the season 2 finale of the original Star Trek, the Enterprise went back in time to do a research mission of Earth in the mid-20th century, and they intercepted a teleportation signal, and the person who appeared was an apparently normal-looking human male who was carrying a cat, and it turned out he was actually surprised. He didn't realize, you guys are Starfleet. Oh, you have a Vulcan. You guys are from the future. You have to send me down. And apparently, the whole premise of Gary 7, he was kind of sort of a Star Trek version of Mission Impossible. Basically, if the show had taken off, he and Terry Garr would have been going around and conducting these sort of sci-fi espionage, counterintelligence operations to get Earth onto a path where it would not destroy itself. And they would be kind of encountering aliens from other planets, from the Star Trek universe and other things. But obviously this did not take off for whatever reason. It fell through. So that's the thought. I had not considered the possibility that it could be somebody from that same group that sent Gary 7, but I've always been very curious about them.
I'm going to take my Hail Mary a step longer and say that is Gary 7, because we don't know how lengthy the lifespan of his species could be. So it's a bit of a Hail Mary, but I'm going out and saying that we will find out not only is it a member of Gary 7 species, but that is actually, in fact, the Gary 7. So that's my first theory. Also something that we kicked around last week is I think that the anomaly. What is it that he? What is the acronym now that Stamets has given it? It's the he's given at the start of the episode. He gives an acronym, an abbreviation for the anomaly now.
BAM or something like that. I know it's something with a B.
Yeah, but anyway, I think if it's going to head to Kaminar, and to talk about refurbishing the spaceport, I think that's going to be about, we really need the spaceport to conduct a massive evacuation. It's something that would affect Saru deeply and personally.
Yeah.
I think at some point, Kaminar, I mean, it could be Earth, but I think my money is, theory-wise, it's going to be Kaminar.
Well, we have, I think, 7 more episodes, so it could be Kaminar, and it could also be Earth, and it could also be Bajor.
It could be Bajor too.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Kaminar, but I would call Bajor a close second. But I think we're on the same wavelength that we are going to see a return to Bajor because there's a justification, which would be like to study the stable wormhole to see what they're missing.
Well, and another thing about the return to Bajor, the hints are all there. We got Ferengi, we got Marion, and we've got a president of the Federation that is part human, part Bajoran, part Cardassian.
Or she's entirely Cardassian, and it's just the evolution of 850 years.
I think if that was the case, they would at least keep the neck ridges because that was their most defining characteristic. Like the Klingon ridges or the Andorian antennae. I think she's definitely, and I think they have said in interviews that she is all 3 of these species mixed together. So I think that we will.
Cardassia has become a melting pot.
Yeah, well, we don't know. It's very likely that in the decades after the Dominion War, Cardassia gave up its union and became members of the Federation alongside Bajor. That's distinctly possible, so that they would have all kind of come together. And it does seem as though the Ferengi became members of the Federation eventually. And we know the Romulans obviously did because most of the survivors either found themselves on new planets within Federation space or found themselves on Vulcans after the supernova. So that remains okay. We have an idea of what happened to the Cardassians. We kind of know what happened to the Bajorans. We know what happened to the Romulans. What about the Klingons?
Yeah, that's still out there.
Yep.
Okay. Which episode do you think? We're in episode 3 now. Which episode do you think we'll finally get to see Jet Reno back?
I think in the next 2. I think either, if not next week, then episode 5 for sure.
My money is on episode 5 or 6. But yes, I think, we will see her before the end of the first half of the season.
I think so, yeah.
So, I mean, to recap, Josh, I'm going to say that I again thought that I like this episode a lot. The right mix of everything, strong writing, action sequences, multiple storylines. This episode really stirred it for me. And the thing that stood out the most for me is I really like their new 10-4. I mean, I would go spend some time there. I totally dig it. I mean, up until now, it's all looked like a cafeteria. Why not, make it look like someplace you want to go and relax?
Definitely. It definitely, or the mess hall is definitely functional. It has a nice window, but God, those chairs are the ugliest thing I've ever seen. And I definitely, the 10 Ford is the ideal place. It's got the fireplace. It's got the mood lighting. It's quiet. You can have a nice little light jazz band in the background. Something. It's just a nice place to go, chill out, have a drink, figure out what's going on, and then go back to work. It's great. I love it. Yeah.
So, do you think they sell Romulan ale there?
I would think so. I think you could definitely get yourself a glass of Romulan ale there. And kick back there. It'd be interesting to see. I would love to see, Gray and Adira. How do you think you two would function with a swig of Romulan ale there? I mean, it does have an effect on people.
That's an excellent point, Josh. I think we should have mentioned the previous section, but I'll bring it up now. I think one of the things we'll see in the future in upcoming episodes is how does it affect their interpersonal dynamic that Gray now has a body?
Ooh, that's going to be a good question.
Yeah. He can actually talk to other people.
Yeah, I have to wonder with Adira that it's like, she had Gray all to herself.
Yeah.
Now Gray is like going around and giving hugs to people and
spending time with others.
Yeah, chatting with Hugh, and probably he's going to be interacting with Tilly and Michael and Saru and Book and everybody else. It's like, how frustrated is Adira going to feel about this? That she's got to share their boyfriend now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we're going to see some interesting relationship dynamics take place now.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's going to be something to watch for. Also, what is going to be being a Guardian going to entail for Gray? Is that mean Gray is going to have to leave Discovery and start living on Trill full time? Is being a Guardian maybe something that's not possible because he's living in an artificial body now? I mean, how artificial is it? Is it a biological? It's obviously not as mechanical as Data's was, but how have they perfected this technology? I mean, we're talking like, say, Cylons.
Yeah.
And I mean, is it kind of like a Cylon thing? And if that's possible, could Gray carry a host again?
Yeah, excellent question. Very good question. Things that we'll find out as we all together, along with our viewers, continue watching, what is an excellent series. So I am going to Josh, give you the first chance to say goodbye to our listeners and plug yourself.
Well, you can. Anybody who wants to get in touch with me, you can reach out to me on Facebook at Josh Pritchett Jr. I'm also the head of the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup organization. We're always looking for new members in the Southern Maryland or Northern Virginia area, or if you just want to chat with us about all things Star Trek, we're a wonderful group. And just as a reminder, my short story collection, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural, is available on Amazon and Kindle.
Thank you, Josh. And anyone who's interested in following my work can follow me at Verde Cosplay when I am not here every week talking about Star Trek Discovery. And to those of you watching our show, happy Hanukkah and True True.
Happy Hanukkah. Kapla.